Hi, I'm Rick Bucher with GenState, and I'm going to go over how I would create a Geese calendar for Bubble. Now, the Geese calendar is a little bit different from the Gregorian calendar in that it's several years behind, and instead of 12 months, there's 13 months. So there's 12 months of 30 days, and then a 13th month of either 5 days or 6 days, depending upon whether it's a leap year or not. So it all works out similar to the Gregorian calendar. But there's nothing in the Bubble ecosphere that can be modified easily to display events in a Geese manner. So we're going to create one utilizing a repeating group and hopefully come up with something which is going to be passable and will work well for the clients that have requested this. So let's start with the Excel file that I'm going to be using to run the repeating group off of. So this is the data I can run it off of. So I figured we'd start with the traditional Gregorian time that we're used to with. So I started with the beginning of the Geese month here, which is the 7th of this month, and it rolls down for several years, so we can utilize this several years down the road. So the different columns that I have here, which I think are going to be all that we need, hopefully, is a start and end time. So the start time would be the date at right at midnight, then that same date close to midnight at the end of that day. So we can use that to look for events that fall in between those two times and display them there. The Geese month, and I'm pretty sure everything I've misspelled, so I'll have to fix that later on when someone that knows what they're doing tells me how these things are actually spelled. But the month, what it looks like in Tigrinya, then the Geese numerals that we can display on there, the date itself in more traditional numerals for reference, and the year. And this last column is grouping, and this is how I'm going to run the repeating group to go from group page to page to page, is by basically bringing up everything in one grouping, then move to the next. So let's go ahead and save that as a CSV. CSV. Yes, we know. Good. Okay, so ahead of time, I created a custom data type here called for the Geese calendar, and I made all of those fields ahead of time. So we should be able to upload what we just created with the CSV directly into Bubble and can start working off of that. So the Geese day, year, both numbers, and the grouping, it's especially important to be a number, but everything else pretty much will be text so that it'll display correctly in the repeating group, and obviously the end time and start time will be dates. So we can go to app data and see if we can upload that with the Geese calendar. CSV. That looks right. Excellent. Okay, so that's going to upload, so we'll have that available to us pretty soon here. So let's go ahead. Oh, that's starting to look good. Let's go ahead and start designing our repeating group that's going to be our calendar. And I apologize, I have not learned the new responsive engine, so this is going to be the old style of repeating group. So I'm sure it's easier in the new way. I just haven't had time to learn it, and it took several years to learn how it is now, and I'm stubborn and old, so I'm sticking with what I know. So if we're going to be making a calendar, if we're using with repeating groups, some things you want to design for mobile and have it expand, some things you want to design expanded and to have it shrink down if you're going to be seeing it in mobile. The repeating groups is something that I've found works best if you design for the larger screen and have it shrink down. So we're going to be making a repeating group. Make it pretty big here. It's going to be a pretty big calendar. Type of content is going to be the Geese calendar. I'm going to do a search for Geese calendar. We'll put the constraint in of the grouping in just a second here. Oh, we can do it right now. I take it back. I'm doing that differently. We're going to do that in a little bit when we make a grouping here to make it look better. Okay, so we're going to search for the Geese calendars. This is a calendar here, so we want to make sure that there are 7 columns for the 7 days. I'm in the way. And 5, so that we have 30, so that the month will display correctly. So that looks pretty good. I want to have this fit not throughout the whole page, but have a 16 pixel margin. So I think those snapped correctly. Good. Okay, so this particular cell here, so 157 pixels, makes sense. So that's what we're going to work with in here when we're displaying the calendar. So let's say we're going to put in some typical calendar things here. Let's get some text here. So let's say this is going to be current sales Geese calendar, Geese numeral. Let's go ahead and make that centered, bold, and pretty big. I think that'll look correct. Let's go ahead and center this text vertically so that looks right. If I just put that at the top, later on I might change it around to make it look a little bit different depending upon how I want to do it, but we can start with this. This seems to make sense. I also want to display the Gregorian date as well. Let's go ahead and put that up here close to that. So this would be the current cells, Geese calendar. Let's just use a start time. Format it as, and we're in Canada, so we're backwards. It doesn't match what Bubble actually comes up with, so we'll start with, oh, they have a Canada version. Perfect. Let's make this smaller. Do not like it when it does that. Let's make this smaller. Something like 11. So it should look better when it goes down to more of a shrunk mobile size. And by having these texts span the whole field, it should shrink, contract if we're making this calendar bigger, smaller, depending upon the screen. Okay. We also want to have, okay, that makes better sense. Within each of the cells, we want to look for events that occur on this particular day. So I'm going to put in a repeating group within the repeating group. These are going to be events. So we're going to do a search for events that the start time is greater than current cell's Gregorian start time, and the start time is less than the end time. So any event that falls between these two times, it should pop up on here. So this is going to be, let's just do the full list for now. I can change that later on. Don't want to do that. It is visible on the page. That'll probably work. Let's go ahead and put a little border on it. And later on, I'll add the coloring for the client's colors in here, but this should work for now. We're also going to need some titles here. What are we looking at? So this particular month. Okay, and this is where I think we need to start making the conditional parts. So I'm going to take these two things here, group them in an element. So this element is going to be Geese calendar. And we want to add a way to custom state. So we want to make a grouping so the page knows what to display when you first bring up the page. And that's going to be a number. Okay. So when we are now searching for events, we're going to look for everything that has the same grouping as what we said when we first started the page. Use calendar. Did I do that wrong? Apparently. Or I put on the wrong thing. Pardon me. Number. Create that. Okay, that looks correct. Okay. That's where I meant to point to in the first place. Grouping equals these calendars grouping. Okay. So if you open the page and it's pointed to grouping number 2, it's going to bring in all of the different days that we showed you there in that particular group. We want to display what month this is displaying down here. So to do that, we're going to do a search for Geese calendar. Grouping equals Geese calendar groups, grouping. Just go for the first item. It's all going to be the same. And let's say the Geese month. Put a little space and do the same thing. But make it the Chagrinya month. So that should look pretty nice. We'll just do this so it'll be centered. Let's go ahead and make that bigger, bolder, nicer, centered. Okay, starting to look good. Not what I meant to do. Move this over a little bit. Because we're going to put some chevrons in here so we can move from month to month. In fact, we can probably do that right now. I'm going to throw an icon on here. Seems to make the most sense. We're going to make that fixed width. Good. This doesn't need to be so tall. And then we're going to attach this to the edge here. So this will stay centered no matter how big or small you make this. This is fixed width. Good. Let's do the same thing on the other side. take it to the upper right-hand corner, point the other direction, and this should attach this title to it. Nope, not quite. There. Looks pretty good. So let's add an action to this. And so since this is going to be looking for the Geese calendar and grouping the Geese calendar's grouping, we need to set that when the page is loaded, and then we can use the chevrons to move that around, and then the repeating group should reflect a change when that is done. Okay, so on the workflow page, when the page is loaded, let's go ahead and set the grouping. So we're going to set a state of an element, the Geese group here, Geese calendar, grouping, and we need to find out which grouping it is based on the current date. So we're going to do a search for Geese calendar, and we want to find something where the start time is less than current date and time. I can spell, don't worry. And the end time is greater than the current date and time. So there should be only one record that matches that. So we do the first item and the grouping. So that's how the group is going to be set when the page is opened. Let's go ahead and add some actions to these chevrons. So if it's clicked, we want to set state again. Geese calendar, grouping, and the value is going to be the current grouping. And since it's a number, we can just say -1. Now, starting off, we don't want people going off where I don't have data, so only if the Geese calendar's grouping is greater than 1 will it do this, because we don't want it to do that otherwise. So let's do the same thing for the other chevron. So let's click, we're going to set a state. Geese calendar, the grouping, the current Geese calendar's grouping, +1. Okay. So it did a lot of work and didn't even preview it, which is always scary. But let's see how this is looking. Pretty good. Okay, that's correct. Now let's see if these chevrons are working. Well, it wasn't supposed to go anywhere because that's the first month. Good. There we go. The events, so the events are popping up, but they are not, didn't put text in there. Not a good idea. Let's go ahead and put text in this repeating group. Actually, we can make this repeating group the whole size of this. And then the text inside of it, that's just going to have the border. That's what I meant to do. Let's throw in some border here. A solid. Throw some roundness in there for fun. Let's go ahead and not make it the whole amount, give it a little bit of margin here. Fix that later in post. Okay. Decent. Let's try that. Good. Okay, that is looking more closely at what I was going for. Don't forget to actually add what we're looking for. Good. Okay. So now we can add an action to these actual events that if someone clicks on it, it's going to bring up some, anything you would do off of a regular calendar. So the formatting is off on this a bit. Probably have some things which are fixed width. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. That should be okay. And that should be okay. Excellent. I do want this to be centered. Forgot to do that. Okay, so let's see how it's looking in mobile view. Not good. Not good at all. So what am I missing here? So the whole group can collapse. We probably need to have make sure that this isn't too big, like the minimum size of the cell. So right now, current cell width, minimum width 166 instead of 100. We don't need that. What we do want is to have it be something closer to, I believe, 40. And we can save some time, go in responsive and see how that's looking as we start shrinking things down. That looks more like it. One, two, three, four, five, six, 7. Excellent. So that worked out. So I'm going to have to do a little work on these to make them a little bit better. And also let's look at the title here, why this is shrinking and moving around. Wrong button. Okay. Why does that start moving? That must have minimum width. Don't need that. Okay, that should make a difference. Good. Okay, so now we have the navigation buttons working. So I do believe we have the basics of a calendar here. We're going to have to work on it a little bit, make sure it looks a little bit better. We can have this get bigger and smaller depending upon the screen size. So we can say when the screen size is page width. Don't worry, I can see that. No, hang on. It's greater than 500. What I'm about to do, we can make the font size bigger. Let's make it a little bit better looking. Nice, nice. Okay, so this is looking like it's going to work out. Then later I'm going to take this whole thing and use it, turn it into a reusable element so we can drop it in different sections of the app. But that is how we made a little Geese calendar. So if you're looking to make a Geese calendar, get a hold of me if you want to know the Excel file that has the translations. I will send those to you, and you can probably use this to make any kind of offbeat calendar that you want to make. But thank you for taking the time to watch this. Again, if you have any questions, get a hold of me. I'd be happy to help out as much as I can. Thank you much.